Hi guys, and welcome back to another podcast in cars. I'm slightly more central in the camera this time. Usually I'm very much shoved over here. I'm trying something new. In today's video we're going to be talking about, not that you guys can see, but manual gearboxes. Because it has become a bit of a thing in recent... Well, I mean, it has been for a while now, depending on where you are in the world. But I've recently noticed how pretty much even here, so I should note for my overseas audience, which I'm sure they are, basically in South Africa, we're very car orientated people. We very much like our cars. We very much like being driver orientated and so on and so forth. And it's a very big thing for us to all very much have manuals. Manuals is like a thing. You got to drive a manual. I'm sorry, it's pissing me off that gonna have to do, I suppose. So basically, majority of people drive a manual. Like, you don't find a lot of people not driving a manual. Until recently, surprisingly enough, basically, there was... I can't remember if I saw a survey or something that actually sparked me to write this down as a podcast and cars topic, but I remember reading somewhere basically that it's like the first time in a very, very long time, if not ever, in South Africa, that we've got almost the same amount of autos on the road than we do manuals. Like, it's almost even at this point, if not actually even now swaying towards autos. But keeping in mind that new car sales are not the same as buying secondhand and blah blah blah, which we do a lot in this country. It's a whole different topic. But my point being, manuals are kind of on the decline, and especially across the world. And then on top of that, a lot of manufacturers are obviously not really offering their cars in a manual anymore. Where a lot of the interest in manuals comes from is sportsier orientated cars like the MX-5, like some of the Porsches, I suppose, Ferraris as well, and so on and so forth. Ferrari hasn't done a manual car, I might be wrong about this, but pretty much since the 430, if I'm correct, which is the early 2000s. Lamborghini hasn't done a manual car since the last generation of the Murcielago. I think even the SV Murcielago didn't have a manual gearbox. It was just flappy pedal auto. Which people are going to argue with me that that's a manual. It's not a manual. It's just basically, it's an auto, but instead of coming here and then having... So some autos have a sequential mode to it. It's not like that. It's... it is very much basically that same thing, but instead of clicking the thing up or down to change gears on your auto, it's just you flick a paddle. That's all it is. Now, this is obviously because a lot of sports cars happen to actually be much faster with a flappy paddle / auto box than it would be with a manual gearbox. Because in order for a manual gearbox to hold as much power basically as modern cars come out with, it would have to be such a beefy manual gearbox, and it would take you 3 to 5 business days to change gear, which is obviously not ideal when you're in a sports car trying to race it, you know what I mean? Or at very least making a gearbox that would feel good, change nice and quick, whatever, but can still hold a lot of power, is exceptionally difficult to manufacture, meaning if you were to buy it, it would be very expensive. So that Lamborghini that you've been looking at, add another couple mil to it just because of the gearbox. So, my point being, sequentials and flappy paddles and stuff like that have kind of overwritten for sports cars and stuff. Obviously, you do get your couple of enthusiast cars that have manual gearboxes, like the new MX-5, does the new Suzuki Swift have? I can't actually remember. I don't think it does, the new Swift Sport. The new Swifts do. The new Swift Sport, I don't think it does. If you can hear tipper-tappering, sorry, it is raining, as you can see out the window. So apologies. I don't actually think the new Swift Sport does. I know that the new Honda Civic, I believe, but also the Accord, I can't remember what it was, but they made a whole trailer like for their new launch release thing, and it was all about the manual gearbox, retaining that kind of feel, that love for, and passion for a manual gearbox, because very few cars actually come out these days with a manual gearbox. Also, shout out to John Cena, because John Cena, if you didn't know, daily drives a Honda Civic Type R, and he's completely in love with the car for the simple fact that it's got a manual gearbox, and he's just like, it's one of the more recent cars you can still buy with a manual gearbox. So shout out to both Honda and John Cena, because John Cena is dope because he drives a Honda Civic. Who would have known that John Cena is a JDM boy? Anyway, my point being, before I get too sidetracked with memes, so obviously auto boxes have landed up just being faster. This is a known fact at this point. It's faster. And an additional to that, oh, Rain, why do you have to be so loud? Anyway, an additional fact to that is, well, no, maybe not an additional fact. Why a lot of us, younger generation and so on and so forth, are climbing into older cars like a Nissan 200SX, a Miata, Honda Civics, so on and so forth, is because we may not necessarily prioritize horsepower. There are a lot of us that do, and there is a lot of car enthusiasts, inverted commas, that prefer a more times matter more than okay, I'm going to have to speak up and loud, and I hope that you guys can hear me, but I'm sorry for the rain. But basically, a lot of modern car enthusiasts are not necessarily also interested in the times. There are a lot of us that are 0 to 60 times, 0 to 100 times, but a lot of us are still very much interested in just trying to have a good driver experience, which, to be 100% honest, is why I have a good laugh, because my car is not the fastest, even now with the turbo kits and so on and so forth. My car is not the fastest, but I still thoroughly enjoy driving my car because of driver experience. Okay, my gearbox is probably on its way out, so it doesn't feel necessarily that great, but I love a notchy gearbox. For another example, when I test drove the ND MX-5 on my channel, that was my uncle's MX-5, I absolutely fell in love with that car for the simple fact of that gearbox is stunning, that it just felt so good to shift between gears on that car. It was a nice notchy, but it wasn't like clunky. Like my gearbox right now is clunky, but I suppose 32-year-old gearbox at this point. But like that, just, it felt so crisp and mint. Oh my gosh. Anyway, before I get rabbled on about an ND MX-5 yet again, there's just a certain sense of being connected to the car that you get with a manual over an auto. So I've driven a couple of autos. I've driven an electric car which doesn't even have gears, but technically is an auto, if that makes sense. I've obviously driven my girlfriend's mom's car, which is an auto. I've driven a Kia Picanto that was auto as well. I've driven one or two autos, in short, and I have the same feeling with all of them. They're slow, dim-witted, and I just can't. Even in the electric car, where you can put your foot down and it's instant torque and stuff. I suppose that's a bit of an exception, but in terms of like all the other autos, like you put your foot down and the car's just like gaga, and then it goes. In a manual, I don't know, I suppose it's the fact that you can like shift down to it, get the car all ready and pumped up and like aggressive, ready to go, and then you can put your foot down and it's instantly just gone. There's also these benefits of like being able to engine brake and so on and so forth. I also just feel like there's less technology, which means that there's less to go wrong. So just simple gearbox that just goes clunk, 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 clunk. But with that even being said, modern manual gearboxes are very difficult because they're also quite electronically driven. For example, in the new Mustang, there is rev match for downshifts. So basically, you'll put the clutch in to change down gears, and as soon as it basically recognizes what you're doing, the car will automatically rev match so that you have like a smooth shift in. Obviously, that's all very fancy modern technology in a manual gearbox, which is very cool. Thank you also Ford for preserving the manual gearbox. My point being, as a whole, though, is that people get sidetracked with the times and stuff that you get out of an auto, the 0 to 60 times and so on and so forth. But I personally, and there are a lot of other car enthusiasts that sit with me and agree with me on this conversation, of manual gearbox is just, it feels better. Just how it is, you know? You have more control, you have more input, you're not asking your butler, Mr. James, if he'll change gears for you. You put your foot down and the car goes, "Oh yes, quite sir," and then changes gear. You are the butler, if that makes sense. You're not being a posh boy, you're doing it yourself. You're getting your hands dirty. Theoretically, obviously, my hands are nice and clean because I have a nice clean shift knob. Lovely. Anyway, because that's something, okay, again, this is also to keep in mind. It is a 1.4 litre Hyundai, where's my grand's Hyundai? i20? Yeah, okay. I've driven my grand's car, which is also an auto, and I have a good laugh at that car, because you put your foot down, and the car is just like, okay, I'll go, and it stays in whatever gear it's in, and it's just like, oh, I'm going, oh, I'm trying so hard. So then you're like, oh, okay, well, you know, I may as well then let off throttle because it's not doing anything anyway. So you let off throttle, and then suddenly the car's just like, oh yeah, I should change gears, by the way. So it changes gears, and now the car's screaming, so you're like, oh, okay, well now I can speed up. So you put your foot down, and it goes to like 3,500 RPM, and then shifts up again, and then starts to struggle and come back down in RPM, and you start to die. And it's just a back and forth of being like, no, listen to me, car. Yeah. So that car is entertaining by itself. But I understand that not all autos are like that. Obviously, my girlfriend's mom's car is a lot better, and it responds a lot better and stuff, to actually doing what you want it to do in terms of when you put throttle. But I suppose this also kind of leads into and plays with the whole SUV movement, which we all know how much I love. Basically, there's big, heavy SUVs, which are generally speaking used for, or at least their original purpose. Listen to me now, because this is very important. The SUV's original purpose was meant to still be a utility vehicle that can overland and do off-roading trips, inverted commas, and so on and so forth. However, you could pack it up and it would still be pretty good, but it would still be very comfortable and usable in an urban climate, whilst a bucky pickup kind of setup is a little bit more aggressive, like this boy that's currently behind me. It's a little bit more aggressive and grunty and worker man setup. Obviously not being sexist there, sorry. Worker woman is also included, or whatever you choose to identify as, a worker sentient ball of light, if you will. So that's all well and fair. That was cool. The issue comes in when Porsche and BMW and Audi kind of started to come in with their 22-inch mags with tires this low and shitty all-wheel drive systems that can't even climb a hill, a grass hill, and so on and so forth. That's where I have issues, but the world seems to think that they're brilliant. Why? I don't fucking know. Anyway, but obviously those cars were meant to be essentially like Grand Tourers, I suppose, but obviously not necessarily in the most comfortable environments. So having an automatic gearbox that would just do everything for you, obviously beneficial. That's great. You don't have to stress about doing anything anymore. The gearbox will take over. So all you have to do is press a button, activate cruise control, and cruise down to the beach. And then, for the last 2 minutes, you have to drive on a sand road to get there, and then you pitch your tent and you're done, I suppose. Obviously, there are exceptions within that and so on and so forth, but that is where I noticed auto started to really start taking in, with the SUV craze that was coming in at the same time. I'm sure there's stuff to do with like the weight of the car as well, and why auto gearbox is better for that situation. In my personal opinion, I don't care, and it's stupid. Both SUVs and autos, but moving on. So yeah, but I really do enjoy a good manual. I've driven a couple of very good manuals as well. I actually got to sit in a Honda Civic Type R, a FK2. I'm very unfamiliar with Honda Civics. I'm sorry. I'm still learning. I am actually going to be test driving it on the channel at some point. That will be a Friday Vlogs video, a Clarkson parody, so you guys can look forward to that. But that's only coming later. But yeah, I don't know. So, oh gosh, I've just absolutely massacred this poor cable. So I can't remember really what I was wanting to say, but there's autos are definitely better in some regards, and for majority of people who are not like you and me, who don't really care for being overly enthused by cars, it's literally just for them to climb in and go down to the shops, go pick up their groceries, then come back. And you can see by the expression on my face, I am bored already just talking about that. Whilst for yourself and I, climbing in our cars and going down to the shops is an event. Oh my gosh, we get to drive our cars, this is great. So you climb in your car and it's loud and it's grunty, and you got the gears that you get to row through on your way to the shop. Not that you even necessarily are racing on your way through to the shop or anything like that, but it's an activity. Whilst for a lot of other people it's actually a chore rather than an activity. So I suppose for the NPCs of the world, it is beneficial to just have an auto, and I do think they have their place, and I do think that they are fine. Obviously for people like that, or for example, the reason why my grand's car is an auto is she has Parkinson's. So that's when your hand can't stop shaking. You uncontrollably can't. You just do this like all the time. And my gran was exceptionally paranoid that she wouldn't be able to actually get it in gear, or for example, she sometimes has it in her legs, and she was concerned that she wouldn't be able to stably have her foot in on the clutch, like it would be jerky and awkward to drive. So for my gran and situations like that, I agree. For NPCs, I'm going to be 100% honest, I agree. The only thing that irritates me with the fact of the NPCs is that they over-bias. There's too many of the NPCs that outweigh our preferred ways, if that makes sense. So basically manufacturers are kind of forced into having to make more autos than they do a manual, which is actually kind of why also South Africa's kind of been pushed towards there, although it was pushed willingly. But it's been pushed in that direction simply because car manufacturers these days don't make manual cars really anymore, because majority of their customers are buying auto. So why bother making a manual? It's more cost effective obviously to just buy in bulk all the parts that you need, which if you having more orders of auto, just do more autos. I don't know. Personal opinion, of which I'm sure many of my viewers will agree, manual is obviously better, but I do think it very much has its place. I'm just hoping that we don't lose the manual gearbox. I don't know if I said manual or auto in my last piece of my sentence, sorry. Auto has its place, manual also has its place, and I'm just hoping that manufacturers see this and respect this and try keep it alive for us, like Mazda's doing for the MX-5. They've seemingly really only had manuals for the MX-5s. There are obviously a couple of autos, but they make majority of them manual, of which I want to shout at Mazda South Africa for a moment. So for those of you who don't know, the MX-5 group all kind of hate Mazda South Africa. Of no offense, Mazda South Africa, but then up your game. Because basically Mazda South Africa does not care about cars. They're just interested in unit price and what sells the best, because they just want more money coming into the business, which in their defense I suppose is acceptable, because if you own a business you kind of want it to be successful. So yeah, but they're also under the guidance of Mazda Japan. But moving past that for a second, we'll circle back to that. But Mazda South Africa, when the NDRF came into the country, so that's the coupe version of the ND MX-5, so not the soft top that can like fold away, it's solid. When that came into the country, they only brought in autos. There were no manuals. Why? Who the fuck knows? I'm swearing a lot in this video, I'm sorry. But they decided to just only bring in autos because I think autos were selling more for their other products, so they decided to just bring in autos. As far as I'm aware, the ND, when the ND was still in the being sold in the country, I think it still is actually, but yeah, when the ND was being sold, they sold majority in manuals, as far as I'm aware. Please somebody correct me, but I think for the NC they were a lot sold in auto. But moving on, yeah, and they just never brought in a manual, which was exceptionally disappointing. And I know a couple of customers, their customers, not my customers, but a couple of people that were like, no, then I'm not buying the car because it doesn't come in a manual. They'd rather keep the NC that had the convertible hardtop than have the ND that has the hardtop, but the NC has a manual, but the ND doesn't. Strange. Very, very strange. Mazda South Africa is quite odd. But if we move past Mazda South Africa, a lot of car manufacturers are kind of forced by what their suppliers in whatever country those cars are made in dictate. And I do know across the world, as I stated previously, majority of car sales right now are auto. So yeah. And what I find exceptionally concerning, but I suppose beneficial in the same breath, because yeah, I'll get to that in a moment, is majority of driver's licenses right now are limited to auto. A lot of kids younger than me, I guess, are only getting automatic driver's licenses, because who needs a manual? Because I've already got my first car, which is an auto, if that makes sense. Luckily I've convinced my girlfriend to get a manual, thank fuck, and thank hell that she got that as her license is that as well. But yeah, a lot of driver's licenses these days are being issued as just auto only, which I find exceptionally interesting, because again, that is kind of where the world is going. And obviously we all know from the States, every now and then burglars will jump into your car, try steal it, realize, oh shit, it's manual, not know how to drive it, and then they climb out and leave because they don't know how to drive a manual. Now there are exceptions, like this boy behind me, this, how am I pointing? I don't know how to point behind me, but the Mazda BT50 and the Toyota Hilux that's here as well, those are all manual. I can guarantee that now. There's also my dad's Hilux that's just over there, that's also manual. Most of those are manual, because, well, especially the more grunty ones, the Mazda maybe not, and maybe this Hilux maybe not, but obviously the older shaped Toyota Hiluxes and the Toyota Land Cruisers, they're very worker car orientated, which generally for like load vehicles, manual is better, because autos kind of can like, they can either share the oil or something like that. I can't remember the exact terminology that my dad used the one time. I'll have to confirm with him, but yeah. So a lot of them end up being manual, but for example, a lot of just generic hatchbacks and so on and so forth, and especially SUVs right now, or auto. So it'd actually be a bit of a theft prevention. Maybe not right now, because there are still a lot of thieves that know how to drive manual, but I'm meaning in a couple generations time. But by the time my grandchildren basically have cars, manual will be the way to go in terms of theft prevention. Although at that point, you know, we all are obviously concerned about the fact that petrol cars, ergo also manual cars, will be banned entirely. Like, you can't just drive them because it has too much emissions and blah blah blah. Personally, in my opinion, I don't think that they'll ban them entirely. I am very concerned about it though, because yeah, I don't know. That's a topic that we've hit in a previous podcast on cars, and also one maybe for the future. But for now, let's just return back to the manual gearboxes. Another point that, whilst we kind of half on the electric car topic, that I'd like to bring up is obviously Toyota. Also, a big shout out to Toyota for preserving the manual. Is trying to make a manual gearbox for an electric car. Now, I've seen a couple videos saying how it's just a fake manual and it just makes a fake thing. As far as I'm aware, yes, it is kind of just a gimmick thing, but it does actually do something. It's not like I can just put the car in neutral and then just continue driving. You know, I can just keep my foot in on the throttle, and all that the clutch pedal and gearbox does is it's kind of just there for me to fiddle with. So I can just be driving at 20 up 20 slow, okay? Let's say I'm doing 60. We're just busy driving around at 60, and, you know, I'm keeping my foot in on the throttle to keep pace, but there we go, just put in the clutch, and now I'm in neutral, but the car just keeps on going as if I've done nothing. I think it does have more to do than that. I believe, again, please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I believe it does actually have something to do with the fact that, like, you have to keep an RPM, and it does actually keep the motors spinning unless the clutch is in and the clutch disengages the motors or something like that. I think it is all very electronic. For example, if I put in the clutch, I think it's not a pressure system like it is on an older car like this. I think it is more like an electronic one. I think more modern manuals might have a similar system where it's like kind of like an electronically driven clutch, but that would be like tenfold in an electric car. So yeah. Do I ultimately think that the manual gearbox is going to disappear? I think the manual gearbox is going to stay, but I think it's going to be a very, very, very rare occurrence. Because keeping in mind, things like the Rimac Navara, okay, for electric cars, speaking. I mean, if we have to look forward, unfortunately, we do have to look at electric cars. Although I don't know if they're the future still. I've heard so many stories coming out of electric cars that I'm actually convinced that maybe people are going to pull back on electric cars, and we might end up just trying to find a more sustainable fuel source, like biofuels and stuff. So basically like running ethanol on all our cars. Yeah, corn juice, let's go. Anyway, but let's just for a moment pretend, in fear obviously, that electric cars are our future. Things like the Rimac, even again, are going to be faster with just a normal automatic box / single speed gearbox that kind of just stretches. I'm not familiar with that kind of setup gearbox, so please do forgive me, but they'll be far faster with that kind of setup than even an electric form of a manual, because again, the split nanoseconds that it takes an auto gearbox to change gears now, if we look at things like the new Porsche GT3 RS, GT2 RS, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and so on and so forth, the split seconds that it takes to shift gears because of its dual clutch systems and so on and so forth. Again, obviously this works differently in auto, but my point is still the same in terms of the regards to how the time is related in it. It takes you an extra couple seconds to shift gears manually, whilst those things are done in a matter of seconds, milliseconds even. You'll just be in the next gear and then off you pop. Off you go for the rest of the day, flying off into the distance at who knows what kind of speeds. And obviously with it being faster, then I don't think that we'd end up having them, because unless it's an enthusiast car, again like the Mazda MX-5 or maybe the GR86, GT86, whatever you want to call it, or whatever Toyota wants to call it in the future. Potentially the new Supra, if there is a new Supra. Anyway, my point being, manual gearboxes I think would stay hypothetically, but it would be a very rare occurrence, because it's kind of just for the cars that enthusiasts buy, not because of their 0 to 60 times in acceleration and stuff, but more so for the driver experience, of which is actually a exceptionally minute group. Again, I don't actually know if Suzuki does a manual gearbox anymore for the sport. I'm going to have to confirm that. But then like Honda, Mazda with the MX-5, maybe Porsche with their slower variants, like the Caymans and the Boxsters and stuff like that. Maybe. I really don't know. They might offer the new 911 in a manual as well, but I doubt it, because it's just so much faster with the auto. A manual makes it so much slower. I don't know. I actually genuinely don't know the future that now lies for our manual gearboxes. I obviously hope and pray that we'll be able to drive our fuel cars in the future and we can still enjoy our manual gearboxes, because I don't really care for 0 to 60 times. I care for a nice enjoyable drive down the mountainside that I can rev match and have a nice fun time smashing through gears and flicking the steering wheel and so forth. Same reason why I enjoy things like a fluid power steering over an electronic power steering, but actually no power steering over anything, because you just have more feel and feedback and stuff. Although no power steering can be annoying for a daily driver, hence why I've still got my power steering. So yeah, I don't know guys, I'm gonna end this video here because I've been rambling for 33 minutes now. So yeah, I will hopefully see you guys in a future video. If you enjoyed this one, please leave a like and a comment down below. Please let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think manual gearboxes will survive? Will we get to our older ages being able to still smash gears, or are we going to have to rely on Sir James to change gears for us in an automatic style? Who knows? My fake leather jacket is peeling. Anyway, until next time guys, I hope you enjoyed. Cheers.